Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, here we are again, back with an old friend now, David Banmiller, veteran of aviation and also the author of Turbulence. And we had a little bit of a detour on the last session where we went off-piste and we were considering whether or not it would be Netflix, Amazon, or a feature film. And now we're back on track again. So today we're looking at session 11, which is chapter 9. And that covers advancing technology. So, David, love to have you back on board again.
How are you? Thanks. Great to be here again. Love chatting with you. You're so easy to talk to. Of course, you just make this whole process very simple. Like you said, talking to an old friend, chatting about war stories and business without being academic, as it were, or superficial, or all the other things that I guess you can be with these kinds of things. But it's just a couple of guys really talking about the industry and experiences. And I think that's what makes it attractive to people that watch it, because I get lots of good comments. People keep telling me, my God, they've been telling me this for years. You have to make a movie. I mean, because people go to the movies to watch what I actually lived in real life.
Yeah, well, as long as I get a walk-in part there somewhere, I'll be happy, Dave.
I already have you cast.
Yeah, is that right?
Oh, but I'm not going to tell you what.
No, I'll be happy to find that one out. That'll be a bit of fun. And talking about films and TV and movies, at the beginning of this chapter, you make reference to something I used to watch all the time as a kid, and I loved it. And it was the Flintstones.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at it, and then it was Fred Flintstone and Barney, wasn't it? Was his mate?
Yep. Fred and Barney.
And then there was Thelma, and what was the other one? What was the other one?
Boy. The other sidekick?
Yeah. I can't remember the other one. I cannot remember her for love nor money. And I didn't want to look it up. But anyhow, we'll come to that. And then, of course, there was Bam Bam. But anyhow, what you're talking about there is like, how things have changed, in
remarkable
industry. And it's incredible. So, we started off, or in the chapter, you start off, with the basics, like, weight and balance, understanding center of gravity and passenger distribution for takeoff. And I find that so interesting, but I also find it, as we've spoken before, where so many people come face to face with those particular statements or restrictions, and they don't have a clue what the crew are talking about. So they say, why can't I sit down the back? Why have I got to sit in the middle or up front? They've got no idea whatsoever. And then in the old combi days, when they were told, right, we've landed, everything's great, but you've got to stay sitting in your seat until we've offloaded the pallets at the back. To them, it was boom, straight over the head. And then you see people getting annoyed and frustrated. And I think the one failing in our industry is that we don't teach and educate and explain why to enough people, so they really embrace what's going on with the whole experience.
I think a lot of folks have no idea that there's cargo underneath, and that in many flights, it's cargo that pays the bill, especially these days, by the way. People say, okay, we got our bags on. I get it. They don't know that there's mail going everywhere. They don't know the cargo. It's just, and I think I mentioned this once before. I've been through a couple of CG problems, right? In the early days with TWA, where I used the wrong operating weight on a 707. It was the two different 707 operating weights, one were the water ingested engines and one that wasn't. So they're different by 25,000 pounds. And when I was a weight control agent in LA, flight from Chicago to London, I was in Chicago at the time, I used the wrong weight. So 4 days later, the captain comes down into operations, says, who's the guy that did the weight and balance? Because in those days, you had a green sheet. You did it yourself. And then you took it up to the gate agent, who took it to the captain, and he's supposed to believe everything you got, right? Including the mechanism to establish the CG, which is what's forward and what's aft and what's the operating weight. Well, I was wrong. So I said, I'll go find out. I go to the file cabinet, pull up the green sheet, and I said, oh, Guy, that's me. So he leans up and he says, son, it's a big, you almost killed me last week. And I said, wow, but you're looking good now. He said, no, I was scared today. He said, when we rotated, the nose wouldn't come off the ground. We were now past the point of no return, and we still couldn't get the nose, and we couldn't get altitude. And we finally got up, but we couldn't get much altitude. And finally, the flight engineer was going through all the numbers. Oh my God, we got the wrong CG. We got the wrong operating weight. And obviously they fixed that. And then I told you, I mentioned before about in Jamaica, we actually had an accident because the people didn't move forward from Montego Bay to Kingston because nobody told the captain. So there was a series of miscommunications. And those went straight up on takeoff out of Montego Bay. And
great big tear in the rear end,
10 feet torn off the rear. And that was grounded for like 3 months. With for the exception of the co-pilot immediately putting the brakes on, there's no way that airplane would have survived. So it's serious stuff. I mean, center of gravity and balance and what you got on an airplane, where it sits.
Yeah.
Plus, by the way, you and I know it flies more efficiently. I mean, the center of gravity.
Yeah. It's right. You're the optimum. Yeah.
You just take a pencil and try to put a pencil on your finger, and it's no more simple than that, right? Balancing it.
Exactly. It's funny enough, what the instructor on our course did the same thing with a ruler.
Yeah,
with a ruler and
paper, I never forgot it.
Paper clips. But I remember doing my weight and balance with Lufthansa, and it was a 6-week course, and then I did the checkouts in Shannon and Sharjah. But I got to say, when you trim an aircraft, especially like it was the 747 at the time, and you do all of that and you see it take off, you get such a sense of pride. It's one of the best jobs, I think, of any airline job there is. I absolutely loved it. It was amazing.
Well, and it's still the same processes are the same process. The aerodynamic lift components are the same, right?
Yep.
Science may have improved in terms of engine performance and winglets and all of that, but the basic function and aerodynamic function of airflow over the wings is what it is. And we would fill out these sheets, and then air freight would call and say, we've got 10,000 pounds, and I'll say, put it in compartment 2 or 3 or 4. And then the mail would call theirs in, and we'd have comat, like company mail, and we'd have bags. Yeah. So those 4 things we got to move around before you think about the people on the top to make sure that it's balanced properly and within a window. I mean, we had a window, as you know, and you can't go outside that window. And the 747, I never forgot the max gross takeoff weight, 760,000 pounds. Can you believe I can still remember that? Yeah. Why? Because every day we would pray that it got over the sand dunes in Los Angeles, because we were always maxed out. We had horse meat, we had all kinds of stuff in there, and passengers full, and full fuel, particularly if it was weather, because you had to have fuel for circling and an alternate. And we'd have some captains that would always put too much fuel in unless their wife and kids were non-revving. And we said, well, we can't take any more passengers because of the fuel. He said, well, hold up on 2,000 pounds.
Yeah. I've been there. Yeah. But and it's also amazing the difference it makes with high altitude airports. So like Mexico and Joburg, and that's another issue. So it's incredible what options, what considerations and what controls have to be in place. And then another thing, which obviously is important now as well, is and you mentioned it quite early on in this chapter, is about flight shaming, the climate control, and when I was talking about why, or what do people know or what they don't know, if they knew more and they had a broader approach to consideration of strong points of view, some of this shaming and finger pointing wouldn't be so obvious and wouldn't be so, it wouldn't be so damning. Because at the end of the day, what this pandemic has taught everybody is without aircraft, the supply chains start to freeze up and slow down. You've got, relief goods. You've got all the good things that happened with getting people to the right areas, to hospitals, getting them out of, some sort of terrible zones, war zones, tragedies, etc. All those things, and getting people to see people, families, etc. You know what I'm saying? Some of the do-gooders who are always saying this should never happen. I mean, my God, how would things happen if it was taken away?
When I was with Aloha, we had to shut it down because of financial issues. I had been warning the governor, who didn't help us at all. I mean, she was one of those people who said, oh, flights should be cheap and we should have a lot of them. And I don't like your old airplanes and they're noisy to my district in Maui. And, she just was off on the fringe, and she was a Republican. And so I went to the top Democrat senator at the time, Dan Inouye. We had a great relationship, as you saw in the book. And she hated that because she said, "You guys always go to the Democrats when you need something." I said, "Yes, because guess what? They usually deliver it, even though I'm a Republican. They do." And so when we shut it down, she calls me, the governor of Hawaii, panicked because the movement of things like heart replacements and valves and real life stuff that we assumed between the islands, because there's no trains and cars and highways between the islands, right? So, my God, we can't get that heart transplant done because we can't get it from here to here. I said, Governor, that's what I've been trying to tell you for a very long time, and you weren't listening. And these are the results. That's just a microcosm of what happens. Now, back to the emissions issue, and I mentioned in the book, and the numbers move around a little bit, and you're reading recently that IATA has a goal, probably Admiral, of dramatic reduction by 2050. Dramatic, maybe totally gone, but certainly very aggressive. And the way the industry has performed over the past 20 years, we as an industry have reduced emissions 1.5 to 2% a year for the past 20 years. Nobody knows it. Nobody talks about it. Everybody says, "Oh, those airplanes are terrible." Yet we have maintained a plateau of emissions given a dramatic increase in the millions of passengers.
Yeah.
So the emissions per passenger has dropped substantially every year. But you won't hear a politician talk about it because it's not the right buzzword.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely wrong. That it's kind of like face masks and COVID. Just give me the science. Don't give me the politics. Don't give me the hidden agenda. Just the science. And the science in support of the airline industry is phenomenal. You know, we went from wood, airplanes made of wood.
Yeah, wood and cloth.
And then wood, cloth, wood, then iron.
Yeah.
And now these carbon composites that are lighter and almost impossible to damage. I remember when Boeing was pitching me on the 787, in the room was a part of the fuselage. And he took a hammer and he banged it to try to dent the fuselage, the carbon fiber. You couldn't do it. Now, as you and I know, when ground service equipment's running around an airplane, invariably a bag load or a commissary truck is going to hit it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, something or a tug, and then you're grounded.
Yeah.
You couldn't break this. So all of a sudden, these airplanes are 20% quieter. They take the average altitude from 8,000 feet to 6,000 feet, which reduces jet lag substantially. And all of these things the industry is doing. And you would think, if you listen to some of these showboat politicians, that we haven't performed. You remember the 70s and the 80s, the 707s taking off with all the dirt coming out the back. And the noise and all that.
Yeah. And the smoke and oh my God, all this. I mean, when you looked at that, it was disgusting. But I like I said, I'm a big advocate that, you know, for all the PR and all the publicity and advertiser stuff, there isn't enough spent on helping people understand the good and the positive, and allowing people then to get caught up in all this negativity, which is a lot of naysayers and no-knowers and, you know, people with the old green-eyed monster and stuff like that. It's I think it's terrible. But anyhow, so plane design and technology, advancing technology. You mentioned there about the aircraft, you know, how they were made. But when you think that they went, you know, going back, you're looking at magnetic compasses. They used to fly at 200 to 500 feet so that they could navigate by the road and the rail, you know, and bonfires on the grounds, on the runways for night flights and things like that. And you look at all the things that happened. And at the end of the day, it's, you know, it's about, what, you know, within 100 years, it's incredible what's been going on. I think we just got a message. We just got a technical message there from the technical background team saying that there's a squeaky noise in the background. So
I think there might have been a dog running around. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, or I was thinking maybe it was a window cleaner who was really, really polishing up the glass there. Well, but so moving on from the bonfires at night, and my God, what a sight that must have been. You know, when you're actually flying in for the cockpit crew, it must have been incredible. But also you know, in the early days, there were a lot of fatal accidents. So that was something that was, you know, had to be addressed. And then from rudimentary machines, you know, to the speeds that are approaching, I mean, it's incredible, 15 to 20,000 miles per hour. It's amazing what's gone on. And then you're looking at retractable landing gear. You're looking at the wing designs with these little winglets, absolutely incredible. And nowadays you've got companies that are looking at things to reduce either weight or help people fly. I had a chat with a new company called Sealer Nova, and they do a special oxygen advancement which allows the aircraft to fly higher. And Sealer Nova is fresh air, and they've got another product that stands for mountain range, because they did it based on the Himalayas, so allowing an aircraft to fly over. So now you've got shorter routes, more fuel efficiency. These companies are incredible. Another one, Bags ID, where they're looking at taking almost like biometrics of a bag and having all those details there, so you don't need special labels anymore, which cuts out all that paperwork and is good for the, you know, it's good for the environment and everything. So it's incredible what's been going on this last 100 years. Now, something that you say in the book, and I thought, what a lovely way to say it. It's not staying in the air that's the difficult thing. It's actually the direction and where you're going and the timing that's such an important part of this. So that then brings you to, again, you know, from going back to maps and charts and radio and radar to autopilots. And that was as early as just around the First World War time, 1914.
Yeah, and when you think about what I call the failure of government to use our tax, you know, the tickets have about a 15 or 20% tax, depending upon where you are. That's supposed to go to the government for air traffic control improvements, but it sort of disappears into the wash of politicians. But I got into this years ago. San Francisco has cross runways, 2 parallel and a cross, and airplanes get routed a certain way that is actually inefficient.
Yep.
And if we had a more sophisticated ILS system and an ability to route people where the captain himself is making the routing decisions, we cut fuel 10, 15, 20%. And our routing of airplanes between A and B is nowhere near as efficient as it could be optimizing technology. And we're not there yet.
Yeah,
it's a huge number. So when people complain about things like, oh, airplanes and fuel and carbon waste and all that, of course, they're flying a private jet, but that's another issue. We need to spend more time and focus on aircraft routing optimization. We got satellites flying all over the place. We got cell phones. I can track you by your cell phone. I mean, it's time to really get everybody together, maybe through IATA, maybe they're doing it. And Willie Walsh is now at IATA. I think I probably ought to drop him a note and see if I get him excited about some of the things we're talking about in terms of educating the public, number one, and number two, this whole routing system. Well, you know what Europe's like. I mean, America's tough enough. I mean, Europe is difficult, and they've got certain patches of Europe that are held for the military and can't go through them. You know, so many efficiency improvements that are just sitting there. It's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. And I think,
in my opinion,
yeah, you know, I think Willie Walsh, I mean, he's a character, and he's unique, I think, to the industry. He's one of the few people that is not afraid to speak his mind, not afraid to stand up for certain things. And he's,
he was a pilot. You know, he was a pilot.
Yeah. But he's now in a role, David. He's now in a role where, if ever there was the need, you know, to be a little bit, you know, to the point and in people's faces, it's now. So he's got a great opportunity. And then there's another Irishman. So I think they're favouring the green passport now. Is Nick Careen, another outspoken fella. So I think between the two of them, they've got the ability to, you know, to take a lot on. So maybe they'll be the new Fred and Barney Flintstone of the modern era.
Well, I'm going to send a book over to.
There we go. There's the window cleaner again. He's doing a good job.
Okay, I think we got it solved.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll keep moving on.
Yeah, I'm going to send Willie a copy of my book. met with him a couple of years ago in his office at Heathrow, overlooking the runways.
Yeah.
Delightful guy. Spent about an hour with him.
Yeah.
He's got great knowledge, and I was very pleased to see him head up IATA. The chief legal counsel for IATA, who's just now retired, Jeff Shane, very good friend of mine. He was Undersecretary of Transportation under Secretary Mineta.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that got me rights into Madrid when I was threatening the president and CEO of Iberia with not getting LA access.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, we already have it. I said, actually, you don't. And if you give me what I want in Madrid, I'll give you what you want in LA. And he thought, oh, who is this guy? What does he know? Well, that's what we did. He fired his lawyer in Washington, who basically was lying to him.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's what it's all about as well. Sometimes, isn't it? Relationships and personalities. And if you've got strength of character like Willie has, then it would be a shame if he didn't now keep going at the speed that he was doing, in his previous life. He needs to.
He's a young guy. He's a young guy. I think he'll do good. I've known a couple of people in that position. The guy named Robert Morton, who used to be CEO of Air Canada and did a really good job there. He had that job a few years ago. He's now on the board of a major leasing company with Steve Hazy. But that's a very influential position done right. I mean, it's like herding cats in a way. You remember, you got like 230 members.
Yeah, and
all over the world.
Please everybody.
Airlines. Yeah. It's a big organization. They're based in Toronto and in Montreal. And Geneva.
Yeah. No. But it's a difficult position to be in. But I think everybody in the industry, especially those that have been around for a while, and also now the up and coming, the new generation, they want to see things happen now, and not all this talk and debate and. It's too much of that goes on. So do less, but do it better. Now, coming back again now. So we've spoken about the wood and cloth and about how the aircraft, the first metal attempts were far too heavy. And then we moved on to, from propellers to jet engines. And then two gentlemen's names that you make reference to. And I thought it was ironic that it was a good old Brit and a good old German. So you're talking about Frank Whittle and Hans von, I can't remember what his name is, O'Hain, but it sounded more of a German Irishman of some way back. But the two of them took a lot of credit for the jet engine.
Well, and they should. As you recall, we sort of put it out of our mind, but a lot of that technology was focused on the V-2 rockets for the Germans to zip them over to London in World War II.
Yeah.
So the technology, I'm sure a lot of folks around the world were working on it because somehow, either through trade secrets or spies or this or that, information moves around. And Werner von Braun, of course, we grabbed him before the Russians grabbed him. But, at the end of World War II, everybody was grabbing these guys. But when you look at the function of the jet engines, there's actually 7 different parts of a jet engine. And don't ask me to explain all of them because I'll make a mistake. But there's 7 major components of an engine. And the upgrades over the years that have reduced an engine or increased the thrust of an engine from, like, one of the old engines on a 707 had 12,000 pounds of thrust, and one engine now has 120,000 pounds of thrust. So you've got 2 engines flying for 10 or 12 hours on an airplane that's, maybe 700,000-800,000 pounds. It's extraordinary. So you have the combination of just pure fuel efficiency, noise reduction, and power and thrust improvements and lift characteristics that if somebody 50 years ago just came in today and looked at this, they would be aghast at the improvements over 50 years in technology, specifically with the power plant.
Yep. No, it's amazing, isn't it? And sorry, you said Hans von Braun there. Brown or Braun? Braun. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was only joking earlier about the O'Hain, but I was wondering why there wasn't a bit of Irish blood in there somewhere. But imagine if him and Mr. Whittle, imagine if they now could see what's going on. And imagine for us now, if we were able to see what's going to happen in the next 50 years, Dave, it's going to be incredible.
Well, we have satellites, but we also have the space station. We're going to colonize the moon as a jumping off point for Mars. It's all happening as we speak.
Amazing.
There's going to be hotels floating around the Earth. I mean, we could do it today.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, you're going to have very, very large hotels floating above the Earth, and waypoints for Mars, ultimately. Yeah. and think about the impact on being able to go up for a few days,
yep,
to a space station, and you're taking off out of Florida, just as a case in point. And then you say, okay, I'm going to spend 3 days here, and then I think I'm going to head back to Hong Kong. So you land in Hong Kong, yeah, right? You spend 3 days there, and you land in Hong Kong.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all coming. It's just
absolutely incredible, amazing. I would go in an instant. I'd love to do something like that, pioneering. I'd say, yeah, I'd happily go. You know, even on the first test flight, just to experience it, it'd be incredible.
Well, shall I tell Sir Richard to add you to the list?
Yeah, yeah. If he wants to have a podcast on the first flight, then I'd happily do it with him.
Or Elon Musk. I mean, I can maybe put your name somewhere.
I'd be happy, mate. If you can squeeze me in there, yeah, that'd be pretty good. No, that'd be great. And then moving forward, like so, then with the jet engines and the commercial uptake. So then you're looking at 1952, and you mentioned in there British Airways, the first jet airliner, whereby they got good old Geoffrey de Havilland to get involved, and the Comet.
That had a very checkered reputation in the early days. Do you remember?
Yes. And
terrible safety issues.
I was going to say terrible, yeah, which was something that, you know, put the fear of God up. Put the fear of God in most people. So whenever they were then going on their first flight, I mean, they were panicking like mad. So I would imagine they felt probably the same then as we probably would on the first one to Mars or to one of the moon, you know, floating hotels.
Well, there was a lot of accidents, as you know, at the Comet, and there was one of the engineers there that kept warning management about the problems, and they ignored them for either political reasons, financial reasons, all the things that can happen.
Money, yeah.
He ended up being right. And that was one example. If you also recall, the 727, when they started flying, there was a lot of accidents.
Yeah.
And it's because they were tail heavy, talking about weight and balance, right?
Yeah.
All the engines were in the back, 3 engines in the back.
Yeah.
So when you flew it, you had to, takeoff was a little bit normal. Landing wasn't, because you had to nose up higher because of the weight in the tail, and then adjust accordingly. So in the early days, there were a lot of 727 accidents because the pilots weren't accustomed to that aerodynamic change based upon the weight of the engines in the tail.
Yeah. No, every time I read something new or I reflect on something, I just full of admiration for the people who started it, who knew what was on their mind and how to make it happen, and then the pilots. And, you know, I just think it's incredible. From, you know, less turbulence, the higher you go, you know, and the difference between being a passenger shaking around and now what they can do with, you know, weather radar and being able to, you know, to modify the flight height, distance, etc., just to make it a more comfortable ride for everybody. It's incredible.
And the collision avoidance system that's now in every airplane.
Yeah.
The computer tells you an alert, and it tells you to dive or go up or left or right. That would have prevented a couple, like there was a midair over the Grand Canyon in the 50s or 60s with United Airlines. Just slammed into each other, everybody died. So it's just one improvement after another. And when you think about it, we're really not finished yet. I mean, it's just going to keep, technology is going to continue to improve.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. You know, something else that you see, you know, well, most people see it in films and stuff, but something that every time I see it, I still cannot believe the way they do it is the refueling, mid-air refueling.
Yeah.
What an incredible thing to do.
You know, there's a company here, not here, Palm Springs, in Dublin, Ireland.
Yeah.
And he owns a bunch of those aircraft. And he's actually based at the airport in Dublin. And he has these KC-30s. I think he's using some old either L1011s or DC-10s. I think he's got a couple of DC-10s for fueling. And that's what he does. He does mid-air fueling for the Air Force.
Amazing.
And so you see this long tube and it just comes out of there. And
yeah.
As we both know, engines are made to be used. I mean, idle engines don't help the performance and the maintenance of an engine. Engines have to fly.
Yep.
And the more they fly, the more efficient they are, the safer they are. And refueling for the military obviously makes sense, particularly for an Air Force one with the president. And in the case of turmoil and so on. Yeah, no,
but you know, the pilots involved in doing that, and also the support technology, I just find it's amazing. Absolutely incredible. Now, another big change, and we spoke about it earlier on in the book, and one of the earlier chapters was the cockpit. You know, so moving from, you know, analog and dials and sliders and levers, you know, and now having things like, you know, and also from the old paper maps, you know, and now you've got 3D landing simulations and weather radar and
on your iPad.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing what goes on now. It's incredible.
Yeah, you could throw away that old crew kit. Remember the big black bag that everybody had to carry around?
Yeah. Which lent itself as a fashion accessory.
Had all the Jepson maps. You know, every city you could ever possibly go to had a page in that very thick Jepson map book.
Yeah.
Who needs that anymore?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Now, another point that you bring up in this particular chapter with development is to do with reservations. And instead of somebody being on the end of a telephone saying, yeah, you got it down, and putting a little mark on a piece of paper, and you not knowing what he does or she does with that piece of paper after the phone call goes down. I mean, that's incredible now with the way you've got algorithms and artificial intelligence and, you know, people's choice and trend and habits and all that built in now to forecasting. It's incredible.
Well, as an example, then versus now, back in the 60s, 70s, when I was at TWA in Chicago, one of my responsibilities was a res agent. I mean, I wasn't running it. I was just a res agent at the time. And when you called in, you wanted to fly from LA to London or New York, and we had 707s at the time, we would take it down. If they wanted first class, you would want a seat assignment. So we had a paper chart for that flight for that day. And we had a circling Susan. So we all sat around and it just turned. And you would turn to that flight and that date, and you write in a seat.
Update it,
Years later, when they changed facilities, they found all these reservations cards that were lost, that were down at the bottom of the desk. When people said, wait, I made a reservation. Well, we can't find it. Well, of course. So circa there. Now today, I'm looking for a flight from Philly to Dublin sometime in June, probably.
Yep.
So I go on one of my favorite websites. They've all done better over the years, but I have to tell you, British and American are really good.
Yeah.
So before you push the button, you punch seats and it'll show you the seats and whether they're occupied or not. And you could say, that looks crowded. Let me check the following days. You're actually looking at the seats assigned on your screen, technology-wise, without talking to anybody.
Yep.
And then you go on and you select your seat. And if you want to change your mind a week later, you just go back and click change my seat, and you change your seat.
Yep.
I mean, from then to now, that's just one simple thing. And then you download your boarding card.
Yep.
And Southwest has a system now, just to throw in a little bit of intrigue here. Over the years, Southwest said, well, we have seat assignment. You can pick any seat you want, except they don't assign them. So that was their clever way of getting around it, to speed up the quick turn. That was part of it. Get on the airplane fast. I'm not sure that element does it, but in any case, let's give them credit for that.
Yeah.
So now, when I fly Southwest Palm Springs up to Oakland, and I've never been really wild about them because I'm spoiled over the years, you know, with first and business class and so on. But they're a good company and they're reliable.
You had a tough old time, eh?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
So
last week they have a system And it's out of here, it's 1 through 30, but out of Oakland, they have more space, gate space. So it's like the first 10, the second 10, the third. So when you go on, if you buy the premium ticket, which isn't much more expensive, you can collect your boarding card online 24 hours in advance.
Yeah.
The sooner you do it 24 hours in advance, you get a number 1, 2, 3, 4, which number 1 means you're A1, you're the first person on the airplane. A2 is the second person, and they actually queue up by number.
Yeah.
So what do you do? At 24 hours in advance, I'm on the screen punching the number, and I was 10 seconds late, and I got number 4. So people are watching that. Yeah. It's the same with frequent flyers. When we went to Singapore a couple of years ago on British on miles.
Yep.
The 380 first class, and that's what we wanted. And we knew exactly when that flight was going to open, X number, 330 days in advance, whatever it was, Other people were on that button too, but Michelle was up at midnight waiting. And when the clock ticked, she pushed the button and she got the last 2 seats. Now we're doing this from home. So the reason for the story is technology has improved so much. Now, Southwest does it differently than American or British, and both are very good at it. But Southwest has said, if we do this, we still have to recognize somebody being willing to pay a little bit more to get on earlier, get the overhead rack, do that kind of thing, and choose their seat, window, aisle, preferable. And so that's what they do. And that's all technology. And there's no human intervention.
Yeah.
That's why airlines have become so efficient. Years ago, you had to talk to a res agent on the phone, tie up time, spend money. Somebody has to pay the res agent.
Yeah.
So now the computer does all that. And I think I mentioned in this chapter, travel agents and technology and distribution systems.
Yeah.
Where, my God, you used to go to a travel agent to do all this stuff.
Yeah. It's that's amazing how things like that happens, and I mean, that activity. And then, you look at things like, people used to always say, Xerox it, rank Xerox with the photocopying, and you look at something, and then you look at the video films, and what's the name of the company that you always used to go and rent your videos from? Blockbuster, that's the one. I can remember being in Spain and the kids used to love it. We go down to Blockbuster, and then Blockbuster realized that people used to love to spend time, going around looking at the films, looking at the offers. So they had popcorn in there and soft drinks and stuff like that. The kids used to love it, and then they come out with a few films. I mean, how on earth did people not see how things were going to change, and they became like dinosaurs?
Well, this guy Hastings, who's Netflix, saw that, and in the first days of Netflix, they mailed you your CD and your video, and you got a mailbox, and you watched the movie, and then you threw it in a return mail. That's how Netflix actually started. Yeah. And they almost crashed and died because it just, technology was moving ahead, and this guy was smart enough to say, well, I better get in line on the curve. And now he's done so well. He makes his own movies. They're getting Academy Awards, for heaven's sakes. The Academy wasn't wild about that. Lots of pushback from Hollywood saying, well, they're not real movie people, except they are.
Yeah. It'd be nice, David, if they make one of Turbulence. That'd be a great loop.
Well, there's a chance. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Indeed. So when you come out and we're talking about reservations, and all of us that were in the business, you remember certain names, and Sabre is one name that everybody recalled, came into the business, which was amazing. And to be honest with you, it's the first time I actually knew what it meant when I read the book. I didn't realize it was semi-automated business research environment, which is a really, really trendy name for it. But, from Sabre, and then everybody else started looking at how they can modify, and some decided to bring their own systems in place, which weren't the best successes. But it's funny, again, how all of that, just develops and develops and develops.
Well, back when that, let's call it not evolution, let's call it revolution, really, occurred, American embraced Sabre, United embraced Apollo. And at the time, TWA tried to start the same systems, and they hired Burroughs.
Yeah.
Who's not as advanced as, you know, I don't know whatever happened to Burroughs. It probably got bought by somebody. Anyhow, they blew millions and millions of dollars and never got across the goal. Apollo did, Sabre did, and of course the rest is history.
Yeah.
Because people don't think of even Apollo as much, but everybody thinks of Sabre.
Yeah.
And so, and I put a lot of that benefit towards Bob Crandall, because he was really the guy, and Tom Plaskett and a few others that I'm probably going to forget, I'm sorry, were really part of pushing that. And I got looped in at the tail end because of the international part, because that was the time when I was at AirCal, we were disputing the availability display, because if a travel agent, if American paid travel agent a little bit of a premium, they'd make sure American showed up on the first page, regardless of whether they were the cheapest. And of course, we took them to court, and that whole issue finally became resolved because they couldn't do it. Well, that same issue was in Europe. And I remember when Brussels was getting their sea legs in the aviation sector as part of the bureaucracy of Brussels and the EU, they had a guy there that I got to be friends with, went to his house for dinner. He was really nice man. And he was the point guy for managing and legislating the bureaucracy surrounding distribution systems in Europe.
Yeah.
Like Sabre. And they were very concerned, as we were in the States, about the power of one company to manipulate availability displays. So in the early days, they put in regulatory actions to thwart the manipulation that was, let's just say, not in the consumer's best interest, because transparency to the consumer on price, availability, seats, equipment type, all of those things are important in the purchasing decision, right?
Of course, yeah.
So, but today, my God, you go into Travelocity and they'll list everybody.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
What these guys do is scoop up the screenscaping, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
Where they go in through sophisticated technology, and they scrape all this information from each airline, and they funnel it all up to Travelocity.
Yep.
And then Travelocity lists them all. Then they got a deal that if you buy a ticket through Travelocity, Americans got to pay them a commission of X.
Yep.
All that has changed. So all of those sites, in part, took away the travel agent. Now the travel agent is around today, but they perform a different function. You're not going to find them in shopping malls. I mean, even Thomas Cook used to be around everywhere in Europe in shopping malls, right? But between their demise and so on, you're not going to find it. But travel agents go to corporations and say, listen, we will represent you, Mr. Corporation, and we'll negotiate the best rates for you with American or Delta.
Yep.
And that's the role that the travel agents are playing today. Those that adapted and survived, those that didn't, of course, didn't. But the benefit to the consumer today, that I'll put it back to the premise we talked about, Sabre as an example, is absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. No, it is indeed. And again, now, sorry to flip over again, but we were talking about, the environment, but also noise. Noise is such an important factor for anybody that lives around airports. And I agree with you. Most people who move to an airport move because it's convenient for work and they know there's an airport there, so they shouldn't be complaining about noise thereafter. However, the noise has improved, and during part of my career, I've been involved with governments and noise abatement and fines and all sorts. And the way it's done and measured, and the way the way aircraft are basically directed, I find it almost a paradox of what was the purpose in the first place. But the FAA, with their clean program, so the continuous lower energy emissions and noise program, I mean, that's also a very positive approach that most people don't really appreciate.
Well, I recall in the section of the book, John Wayne, the airport in Newport Beach was named after John Wayne. Who was at the end of the runway. And he didn't like the noise, and he didn't like the airport it's named after him. I went to the dedication with his family, they're really very nice people, and his wife. In any case, they had 5 monitors, which they still have at the end of the runway. And so you takeoff techniques, recognize those. So if you didn't ring the bell at certain of those noise monitors, you got more flights.
Yep.
And when the 737-300 came out, we figured out through our chief pilot that we could pull back the engines, pull up the landing gear, not have the air conditioning on, and float.
That's it.
Over the monitors. And we went to Boeing and they said, well, no, that's not possible. Now we're talking to the chief engineers and noise experts at Boeing, little old us.
Yep.
So we had to Seattle, we said we can do it. So we did a test on a Saturday morning down in Newport Beach, took an airplane offline, got a mechanic, a couple of FAA guys, because there was an issue of pulling back power. And we took off and we did the procedure. We floated over the monitors. And it was able to give us a lot more flights. And what we had to do was prove that we could fly on one engine, because this was a 2-engine airplane, with no power in one engine. So on takeoff, prime of takeoff, once we rotated, we pulled back one of the 2 engines and just used one engine. And the other one was like virtually the idle. And we were able to maintain a positive climb gradient for another 45 seconds over to Catalina. So we said to the FAA, see, we can do this because there's safety features. They said, well, we need an automatic thrust recovery system to put in place. I said, but the pilot could have gone to the John and come back and we'd still be fine. He said, it doesn't matter. If you want us to approve it, it's got to be done automatically. Like if one engine goes out, the other one spools up to 100% instantly. We said, okay, we'll do that. And I tried to convince Boeing to keep it private for a while, but they're selling airplanes, so they told everybody about it. Exactly. So anyhow, that's a story about noise. And then when I went to America, I tried to get the American guys to do it, particularly the CEO Crandall. And he said, you could do it because you have 1,000 pilots. I've got 10,000 pilots. And I'm just not willing to take the risk. So I lost that argument with at a smaller airline, you could do things at a bigger airline. Yeah. Structure gets in your way.
Exactly. And that's something that's there's good things and bad things about being the big fish or the little fish. And it all depends on the size of the tank as well. Now, something that's really, really, really improved, and now it's such a big influencer for their decision making, is the IFE, the in-flight entertainment, and also the catering and everything that goes with the experience. I know people that will go a little bit further and maybe even have a stop or via one of the hubs just because of the experience in the cabin, and they absolutely love it. To them, it's something that they see as a reward to the hard work they've been doing, or they just want to get a little bit of their own time, and they just totally disengage from everything whilst they're having that experience. And it's absolutely amazing now what you can do on board.
I'm one of those people. I remember the days flying the 747 back from Paris to New York with my family up in the Bubble, which was a cocktail lounge at the time.
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon, having a couple of drinks and snacks and just looking around saying, God, this is fabulous. And of course, the movies have evolved over time from none. And some airplanes still don't have in-flight entertainment because of the nature of the airplane and its usage. Southwest doesn't have any movies on airplanes, but they have now, and as American and others, added the iPad and the laptop. Yep. So because of Wi-Fi improvements worldwide, you can watch your movie. You don't need a drop down, an overhead or any of that. You just pull out your iPad, go into settings, put Wi-Fi, and there's some movies for free and others that you buy on your iPad. So and by the way, that has saved a ton of money in fuel because those in-flight entertainment systems were very heavy.
Yeah.
And in fact, you remember the phones that were on the airplanes. You don't see them anymore, but I was the first airline when I was running Air Cal, and USA Today made a big deal out of it. We were the first people to put a phone on an airplane, the very first at Air Cal.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And now you're not going to find one. And they were expensive. If you made a call, you were spending a lot of money.
Yeah. But had to be an important person you were calling.
Well, now you can email from 30,000 feet over the Atlantic. And I recall a meeting with all the airline officers at American talking about this technology. And I was always forward thinking. I said, someday we got to get that, instead of talking to the ground, Wi-Fi goes to ground units. And as you fly across the US, you're taking signals through ground power units. I said, someday it's going to be the other way around. It's going to go up, not down. And you're going to be talking to satellites. So get ready for airplanes that are going to have a nodule on the top, not the bottom.
Yeah.
If you look at the airplanes today, you see that bubble on the top?
Yeah.
That's how you get the Wi-Fi. It talks to satellites.
Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, just sitting down thinking how I'm when I look at some of the things that have been, invented and created, that I just think, how on earth do they think about it and how do they make it happen? It's incredible, absolutely incredible. But on the flip side, so many things that were not right back then are still not 100% right now. And in this particular chapter, you end with a reference and a quote from a French writer, Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr. Now, my French is terrible. As you know, my English isn't that good either. So I wouldn't even dare attempt the French. But basically what it means is the more things change, the more they stay the same. And
it's a very famous quote over the years. And I said that because all the different experiences in travel, from check-in to bags to in-flight experiences, some of the stuff is like basic stuff. An in-flight service might change. You might have fancy glasses, crystal glasses or not. You might have fine wines or not, or in the world of COVID, you get nothing. But you still have a flight attendant for every 50 passengers, regulatory. That's never going to change for emergency exit reasons. And you might have one or two more flight attendants, depending upon where you're going, to add service. But toilets, food service, galleys, all that is now over the years. The chairs have changed, gotten more sophisticated. There's a lot of buttons and flip up and down and all kinds of cool stuff, particularly in the front. Lavatories have changed. The toilets now have that sucking sensation because it's vacuum oriented and much more efficient. And so there's nuances, but some of it is the same. Passenger desire is pretty much the same.
Yeah, but I tell you what is a constant problem now is the amount of pairs of glasses, phones, and wallets that have gone down in the reclining chairs, and people trying to get in and get down to it and everything. The amount of times I see people, losing stuff there, that's amazing. So that's one of the things that won't change. Dave, we've come to the end of another session. Okay, and we're now next session. We're going to be entering into part 3. Business. And we'll be looking at managing 747 sized egos, which is something I love because I've met so many people with 747 sized egos and a Cessna size hangar. And I love it. I love that particular issue because there's been some terrible characters that I've met, probably as many as the great ones, but I look forward to that.
Let me close with this comment that you will find reflective and interesting. We used to say in Texas, particularly with people that thought they were more than what they are, or drove a fancy car, but they couldn't afford it. They just wanted you to think they could. Anyhow, we used to call it all hat, no cattle.
All hat, no cattle. Yeah.
In other words, that's a Texas phrase.
That. Texas, with Longhorns, but I'll remember that. All hat, no cattle. Yep, that's a pretty good one. Listen, it's always a pleasure. And the one thing that I find unique is no matter what the subject matter, or whether we detour or go off piste or up or down or whatever, you've always got something that you've experienced. And that experience, Dave, is incredible. So fair play to you, my friend. You've got a great memory and, you've done a lot and it's lovely to talk to you as ever. I look forward to it in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll start having a bit of fun with these 747 sized egos.
Oh, yes, we will. Count on it.
Yeah. All right. Take care of yourself.
Cheers.
All the best.